Hi, my name is Elizabeth and I'm an alcoholic, and I want to introduce our speaker tonight. Her name is Camille F. from Homer, Alaska, and she's my sponsor and I love her so much. And go ahead, Camille. You got all the way till about what, 5 till 9? 5 till 5
Okay,
your time. Okay, thank you.
thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Camille, and I am a real alcoholic. I know that irritates some people to say they're a real alcoholic because they don't even know what an alcoholic is. But and it took me some time. My sobriety date. Well, first of all, I want to thank Elizabeth for asking me, and you guys for listening. It's really a pleasure to be able to share my story about spiritual strength and hope. My sobriety date is May the 2nd of 1972. And for that, I never thought that was going to be my sobriety date. In fact, when I came here, I didn't even have a drinking problem. I just had a problem of perceptions that weren't even real. But thank God I got into a group of people in Denver, Colorado called the Denver Young Peoples. And they had some real specific things. Number one, you had to get a sponsor. Well, I picked out a sponsor. He had blonde hair, blue eyes. He was a veterinarian, drove a Cadillac, had an airplane. And I thought, that's a good sponsor for me. And that didn't go over well with him or the other people. They said women have to sponsor women and men sponsor men. And I thought that was the dumbest rule. In fact, there were so many things in the book that I thought were stupid. It's lucky that I had a sponsor take me through each page and point it out, because I had been born to a real alcoholic in Idaho. And she had been, oh, she was drinking. She drank harder than I did, but they had told her that she liked to bar fight with Indians. She wasn't Indian, but she loved to bar fight and get drunk. And the judge told her, if you get drunk one more time, we're taking the baby away. I was the baby. Well, after 3 days of in a motel by myself, crying and carrying on, the police came and got me and took me away. And so the judge said to her, well, we're going to have to take your baby. And she said, you know what? I don't have a baby. All I want to do is drink. I don't want a baby. I don't want any responsibilities. And thank God, that was the best thing that woman could have done. I forgave her many years, and I praise the man that took me away, because back in 1948, they didn't have meetings. They didn't have, well, not in Montana where she was. And besides, back in the 40s, women didn't have a problem. It was just the men. So I was adopted by these two people, and they had no idea what they were getting. And I was so grateful to them. But getting back to my alcoholism, I didn't start drinking, alcoholically, till I was 19. I drank with the family, the Mogan David wine and for Thanksgiving and all that. It didn't do anything. Well, if you look at the content of the alcohol in Mogan David wine, it's not real heavy. But it was after I got into college in Havre, Montana, and I met these guys in the Air Force, and I thought, well, they know how to drink. And my roommate, she knew how to drink. In fact, we went to a football game, and she fell down the steps and threw her alcohol all over the president of the university. Now, I was very disgusted at that kind of behavior. I said, I'll never do that. Well, I did other things worse than that, but when I tasted alcohol, and it finally was the thing that made me okay. And I just thought it was the most wonderful thing. I didn't get sick. I didn't hangover. I didn't puke. In fact, I thought, boy, this is the thing I've always needed. Because when I grew up, I had what was called fetal alcohol effect. It's not fetal alcohol syndrome, but her drinking had affected me. And as a result, I had a hard time in school. I couldn't read. When you can't read, other kids have a tendency to isolate you and push you out the door. So I always felt like I was coming in second, coming from behind. And going through the book, there's a part in here with Bill's story, and I really related to this because he was over there fighting the war, and there were people that brought him into their homes and made him feel okay. It says, here it is, it says, we here was love, applause, moment sublime, with individual hilarious. I was part of life at last. And even though I hadn't, I was about 18, 19 years old, I'd never felt part of life. The only time that I felt part of life was when I was riding a horse. And that was the one thing that I could do in Montana. That was my first addiction, and I would have done anything to ride a horse. It saved me because I wasn't interested in boys. I wasn't interested in anything except the horses. So as a result, I didn't start drinking till I was 19, back in college. And then I found I could drink and be okay. I could talk to people, I could dance, I could do a lot of things. I even learned how to ski in Kalispell, Montana. So I was moved out of Montana, went into, my folks had moved to Oregon, and naturally I went and found a place where I could drink at a bar. My mother asked me one time, she said, how come you always get back over here across the lake? We're in the Bellevue and they're in Seattle at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I don't know, that's when everybody decided to go home. Well, I'd found, a whole bunch of people that liked to drink and had fun and dance. And I always knew I was going home when I'd get on the floating bridge and get across the lake. The guy I was going with said, I'm going to Vail. Would you like to go with me? Well, when you're drinking and your parents really don't understand, they never saw me drink because I never was home when I was drinking and they weren't drinkers. And I said, I'd like to go anywhere. So with $25 in my pocket, I jumped at his new Camaro and we went off and went to Vail, Colorado. When I drove into Vail, it was like I drove into heaven. All the lights were glistening, and first thing we did is we got a drink. And when I would get a drink, it was just like I came alive. After about 2 weeks, this guy, he decided that they weren't giving him enough prestige. He said, I'm going to go to Europe and ski there. Well, he didn't ask me if I wanted to go, so I said, well, I'm going to stay here. I stayed in Vail for 2 years, and that was where I hit my bottom. And it was fortunate that I could do that because there were no limits. I could drink as much as I want. Nobody told me that I shouldn't drink. I didn't have to hide it. I just drank and had a lot of fun. A lot of people would come into Vail, not suspecting that I was going to meet them at their bus and say, hey, would you like to go to a party? I had one girl from Washington, D.C., when she got back on the bus, she said, God, I hope I never have to do this again. I said, do what? She said, go around with you and drink. I thought, well, what's wrong with you? But she went on and I went on. Well, I like to drink, and I also like to drive. The thrill, there was a real thrill of driving when you don't know where you're going or what you're doing. One time that it was tough, though, I was going over the Rocky Mountains on Loveland Pass, and something told me to stop. Well, if I hadn't stopped, I would have drove over a 10-foot cliff. God was with me. He was with me the whole time when I was drinking. He was with me. Well, he's still with me up here in Alaska. But a guy came and he said, you're drunk. I said, you darn right I'm drunk. He said, well, you better let that guy drive. Well, he was passed out in the back seat. I said, okay. So I shook him up. I said, well, come on, let's go to Denver. So we went on to Denver and didn't think a thing about it. I hadn't been around a bunch of drunks. I just thought it was just a good time to have a good party and go do stuff that normally you wouldn't do. The only thing about it is that I got picked up by the Denver Police Department. And the reason they picked me up because I couldn't remember. I was so drunk whether I was supposed to stop at red lights or go at red lights. So I would stop at green lights and go at red lights. Well, at 3 o'clock in the morning, they noticed me and they stopped me and the cop said, "You're drunk." I said, "You darn right I am." I didn't tell him I had only 2 drinks. And he said, "Well, we're going to have to take you to jail." I said, "Whatever." I threw my arms around and scared him to death, gave him a kiss, and I said, "Thank you." And I did go to jail. And that was the 3rd time I'd gone to jail. I'd gone to jail when I was in Tacoma, Washington for drinking and driving. And I also had gone to jail when I was in Eagle, Colorado for drinking and driving. Now, you would have thought that I would have woke up, but I didn't. Because alcohol was a thing that I loved. It made me feel okay inside. And that was that low self-esteem. I didn't ride my horses anymore. So I felt, and I was okay skier, but I wasn't that great. After the 3rd DUI, they said, well, in Denver in 1971, they had a program. They were going to try to help the poor alcoholics. And it was called the Denver Safety Alcohol Program. And they gave me this little test. Now, if anybody gives you a test, make sure you don't pass the test. Well, so I, did you drink in the morning? No. Did you drink this? Did you drink? No. And so I passed the test. Well, the judge didn't believe me. He said, we're going to send you to this program, and you have to take antabuse. Now, I don't know how many of you have had antabuse or how many have tried it, but I tried it, and I found out with the dosage I was taking, I could drink for a little bit, and I'd get a little fuzzy, my face would turn red. So I went and told the doctor, and he said, "Well, I'll give you more of that." They stopped using antabuse, I don't know when, because it really, if you did drink it, you could have a heart attack. So they decided they wouldn't put people on antabuse. What they'll do is they'll send them to AA meetings. Well, that's when we got all these people coming to AA meetings, and some of the real drunks in there, they were really irritated because they said, well, nobody had to tell us to go to AA. And but I used to listen to all this stuff and think, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm just a potential. They had a program in Denver that was for Skid Row alcoholics. And the guys in Vail, they said, we need to send you to this program. Well, whatever. I couldn't work. I wasn't working. I didn't have any place to live. I didn't have any good codependent men that I could lean on. So I said, okay, why not? So I hitchhiked down to this place called Fort Logan. And it was a 2-week program that was designed for Skid Row alcoholics. Well, here I was 23 and a ski bunny. And the stories they told me, I thought were the most interesting and enlightening programs I'd ever seen. The program was 2 weeks. They had me for 6 weeks. And I didn't think I was alcoholic, so I said I'm a potential. Now, the reason that I thought I might have a little problem, because in Montana, they have open records. And I went back and I was able to read about my mother and her drinking problem and everything. And all I could feel for that woman was, I'm so sorry for her. She would be dead. I never did go look for her because the way she was drinking, she was way past me. And so I thought, well, what I should do is move out of Vail and go to Denver. So I had just a little knapsack, and I went and the only people that I knew in Denver were people in the program because I met some of those. Oh, by the way, I had been sentenced to go to AA in Vail. Well, it was 5 men and me. And I did everything I could to have those guys kick me out of the meeting. I brought a lap dog and he was a Labrador, and he would get in your face and lick. Then they wanted me to read the book, and I said, I can't read. In fact, I learned how to read by reading the big book. And I just, because of my learning disability, well, then I brought another kid, and she was a screaming little 3-year-old kid named Brandy. And just stuff like that. And that's why they sent me down to Fort Logan, just to get rid of me. But we would see each other all the time. And they were nice people. The 13th step that's been around for years, nobody, I think I was just too sick. They didn't want to get involved with me. But I did move down to Denver, and I rented a place. It was a $10 a week room, and I could walk to the AA club at 1311 York Street. Now, I wasn't drinking all the time. I just drink every now and then. And so I'd go and I'd just playing around with these people. So they said, well, Camille, I'll go up to the club and debate with them, with these sober alcoholic men. And they'll say, well, why don't you try this test? I said, what test? The one where you drink 2 drinks, no more, no less. And they'll tell you whether you're an alcoholic. Well, I thought that was a great thing. So I went down to the corner bar and I ordered up 2 drinks. And I had the first one. And I sat there and I waited. I waited to go into this frenzy. I got to have another drink. Well, that never happened. So I had another drink. And I waited. And it didn't do anything. Now, at the end of my drinking, I was drinking a 5th of Johnny Walker Scotch straight. I could drink an awful lot. And that's why a little drink wouldn't bother me. But I had a 3rd drink. Oh, God. It took the 3rd drink and I felt wonderful. So what I did, I ran back up to the club and I told the guys, they said, well, I changed the test. And they said, Camille, you flunked the test. It was 2 drinks, no more, no less. And so I said, well, okay, I'd found this guy who I wanted to be my sponsor, and I called him up. And I said, well, I got sort of drunk last night. And he said, I'll meet you at the White Spot. That was a restaurant. And so I went and I met him. And he said, Camille, you're not ready. You're not ready for this program. I said, well, God, I'm glad somebody has some insight. But the thing about it is that the judge had to put a deal, if he found me drunk in the next year, I was going to go to the penitentiary. I didn't think that was a good idea, but I didn't want to, push that limit. And she said, well, what we'll do, we'll go back up to the club and this is what I want you to do. I want you to make a decision to not drink for a whole year. And I thought to myself, well, what happened to the 1 day at a time business? You can't tell me what to do. He said, now listen, if you don't drink for 1 year and you do everything that AA asks you. I said, like what? What's you going to ask me? Get a sponsor, read the big book, do the steps, do service work. When somebody asks you to do something in AA, your answer is yes. And he said, after that whole year, and you don't get drunk, then we will go ahead and relieve you of your decision. I did that. First 3 women I asked to sponsor me, they said, absolutely not. We're not going to sponsor you because you don't listen. Well, I wasn't interested in listening. I was interested in getting over. We learn a lot of things when we're drinking, and even before. We're good con artists, liars, cheats. And I told so many lies over the years, I didn't know what the truth and the false was. But I did make that decision, and I told those guys that I'm not going to drink for a year. And so I started in Denver Young People's, and that's the time when they had real coffee cups. I think we've screwed ourselves up by having styrofoam cups because it's very therapeutic to be washing cups and talking to people. We had the meeting after the meeting. I'm so sorry that we don't do that anymore. At least we sure don't do it here in Homer. Homer is a halibut capital of the world, and a lot of drunks come up here. But they all go to bed early because the restaurants all shut down. And it'll be 50 years of AA in Homer, Alaska. So they've had some real alcoholics up here, started a good program. So after the first year, they had a meeting and they wouldn't let, early on, they wouldn't let you talk in the meeting. What would happen is that they would have every meeting had a topic out of the big book. And if you hadn't worked a step or you hadn't had any experience with that particular topic, they said, thank you, pass. Well, I always had something to say. And they always said, Camille, thanks for sharing. Susan, they'll go to the next one. And but when I got to talk was after the meeting. And we would talk and get the big book out and debate. And the words that were in the big book, I really didn't understand because it was foreign to me. We got into the doctor's opinion, and thank God they really showed me about the doctor's opinion when we went through it. There were so many things that were in there. My favorite word in the doctor's opinion is frothy emotional appeal. Frothy. I thought that meant foaming at the mouth, begging me to quit drinking. Well, that's not what it meant. Frothy means frivolous, not substantiated. But the paragraph before that really hit me. It says, we believe and so suggest a few years ago that the actions of alcohol on the chronic alcoholic is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to that class and never occurs in the average temperance drinker. And they said, Camille, has that ever happened to you? Yeah. One drink meant another and another. And they said, but it doesn't happen in the average temperance drinker. And I looked at that, and that really irritated me. Because I was trying to, I didn't want to be an alcoholic. I don't know anybody that was. Well, now listen, you get to be an alcoholic when you come into AA. Before you're just a drunk, a slut, worthless bum. But it's a step up when you get to be in the program. So, and they went through the different thing. And on the bottom of the page, it says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive. While they admit it is dangerous, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the truth from the false. And that was me. I couldn't tell the truth from the false. I just, if you tell a lie 10 times, it becomes your truth. And so I had a hard time. They said, especially with working the steps. And they wanted you to be honest. I didn't know what honesty meant. Because I'd just done so many goofy things. And there's a lot of stories I can tell you, but I want to get more into recovery. Because the thing that I found too is that to them, the alcoholic life seems the only normal one. When you came in, or when I came in, all my friends were drunks. They all drank just like I did. And that was my normal life. I don't care whether I was skiing or whatever activity I was doing, I always had a drink with me. And it was normal. Now, the next sentence, it says they are restless, irritable, and discontent until they can again experience the same ease and comfort which come at once by taking a few drinks which they see others take with impunity. That's what, without a drink, I was restless, irritable, and discontent. I see people come in. In fact, I went to a meeting today, and the new ones, they sort of bounce around and dance and get up and go to the bathroom, and then they get a coffee, and then they, I call it RID. I was restless, irritable, and discontent because I didn't have a program. The only solution that I have to life was alcohol. And without it, I didn't have a clue. So I got into the steps. That was just sort of a requirement. I need to get a drink of water here. And Are you powerless over alcohol? Well, now what does that mean? You know, and because I'd done that test, and they said, yeah, but if you didn't have anything else going, could you stay stopped? I said, who in their right mind would want to stay stopped? Now I'm one of these people that I was at the beginning of the I was at the beginning, and alcohol was just something that was so normal, but I couldn't think. I couldn't work. I understand why people drink. I really do. Because if you don't get, there's a magic in working the steps. There's a magic in this program. And if you don't ever experience that magic and you don't ever experience that new solution, you're miserable. And I was just totally miserable. Well, lucky, the fellowship of the Denver young people, it was great. We were doing all sorts of things. We were going to dances. We were going to conferences. In fact, we did a lot of 12-step calls. 12-step call years ago consisted of you'd go with a person, well, they would call up and say, this person needs a 12-step call. Now, this is back before they had all the treatment centers. So we were just sitting there on the porch at 1311 York Street. Call come in, it's just like the fire department call. They'd come in, we'd all jump in 3 or 4 cars and go racing over to this individual's house. I bet they were just scared when we would all show up. But the 12-step call at that time consisted of the older person that had a lot of sobriety and the new person, which was me. I had just a little bit. Where the drunk related more to me than the old timer. But the old timer said, now listen, I'm going to share my story and then you can talk for a second. They really meant a second. And that's the way I learned how to 12-step. Did we get many? Sometimes. I'm going to tell you one little story about me 12-stepping. I used to be a bus driver for the city of Denver. And that's because I was tired. I couldn't make any money, so I became a bus driver. But I'd been talking to this guy by the name of Jose. And Jose, he was always drunk when he got on the bus. And so we got talking, you know, about AA and everybody else got to listen to what we were saying. I didn't care about my anonymity. But one day I said, so Jose, would you like to sober up? He said, si, senorita, I'd love to sober up. I said, okay. So we went, my route was right by the AA club. So I drove and I put my flashers on the bus and I told everybody on the bus I was going to work, by the way. Now listen, this man is very sick and he finally has decided he wants to get sober. So I said, I'll be right back. So I went up and there was a guy sitting up there. I said, I have a man on the bus, he wants to get sober. So here comes these men, about 10 of them, down the steps. They got Jose, they took him back up to the club and they 12-stepped him all day. Well, after about 6 hours, Jose, he looks around and he said, where am I? And they said, well, you're at 1311 York Street. And he said, well, what kind of a deal is this? They said, well, this is a clubhouse for sober alcoholics. And Jose said to him, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm getting the H out of here. And he did. He ran out of there, never again got on my bus. But that's why that was the height of my 12-step call. So I got back into the steps and I'm thinking about my first third step. The first third step I did it at the cathedral in Denver because I was Catholic. But I'd forgotten that when you light the candles, you're supposed to put money in it. Well, I lit every candle in that church. I didn't put any money in it, but I did make a third step decision. And after that third step decision, I thought I was a saint. Well, that lasted for about a half a day. And then we got into the inventory. The inventory has been so helpful. The first inventory I did was all about sex. It wasn't about, I had no resentments. That's because I didn't feel anything. I had no angers. I had no fears. I was terrified all the time, but I couldn't even recognize those feelings. So I did my inventory with my sponsor, who was my age, and I listened to her inventory. That's what we do. We swap inventories. And I thought, boy, if you ever say anything about me, I know a heck of a lot about you now. But it did help. Found out that I'm not the worst person in the world. I'm not the person that has never done any dumb things. So that helped. And then I went on to do 6 and 7. And now when you're supposed to write down people that you want to make amends to. Well, I said, okay, that sounds good. I'd with one of my horse trainers, I was so mad at him, I wanted to kill him, so I got a horseshoe. I wasn't even drinking then. Got a horseshoe and hit him over the head. And but the stock show was in Denver, and there he was. So I said to him, I am working, I'm in AA, and I need to make amends to you. Well, he didn't have a clue. He said, well, what happened? I told him I was sorry. I said, what can I do to make it right between us? He said, well, why don't we go to bed together? I've always wanted to go to bed with you. I said, would that make it right? He said, yeah. So I did. Then I went and told my sponsor, and she said, no, Camille, that's not what you do. You know, I didn't know. I didn't get drunk over it. Coming out of the wild 60s, where everybody was, the old saying, if you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with. And I always loved a lot of people. And we just didn't judge each other, the young peoples, because we were all crazy. But we stayed sober and we worked steps and we had a lot of fun. Well, after about 3 years of that, I was cured. I don't know if you've ever had that happen to you, because I knew how to work the steps. They had made me a GSR, so I was the president of AA, and I was telling the people in our group what to do. And they just tolerated it. So I thought, well, this bus driving, I tried driving cab, and that wasn't for me, except they did have the international in AA International in Denver. And the thing about that is that I would pick up people at the airport and take them downtown. And AAs, when they're sober, they're good tippers. So I made a lot of money during that convention. Only went to 2 meetings. The first one I went to was Loners International. And these are people that are on ships and isolated. They didn't have the internet like they do now, but it was very interesting. Heard a lot of good stories. But then the next one was a big meeting. And I swear to God that I was up on the higher part of the convention center. And I thought I saw Bill Wilson. I hit my buddies. I said, listen, Bill's down there. He's in the front row. And I kept that story up for a couple of years till somebody said, Bill died the year before, Camille. I don't know who you saw, but I said, it was Bill. His spirit was there. I attended many, many internationals after that. It's a wonderful experience to do. I spoke at 3 of them. And to be able to sit in a group of people and you don't understand their language, but you know exactly what they're talking about. So I, at that time, and then time I left, I thought I knew everything about AA. And so I thought, well, I'll just do it on my own. When I start doing things on my own, I become real nasty, bad mouth, bad attitude. And so I talked to a woman that was my sponsor. And no, she wasn't my sponsor yet, but she was a sponsee. She said, why don't you write this letter to a woman in California by the name of the Dragon Lady, and you'll be able to get some relief. So I did. And she said she wished she would have saved that letter. She said every other word was a 4-letter word. I was so angry. I was just as angry. I don't know it. You know, when I asked God to relieve me of my drinking, I said, God, I don't know whether I'm an alcoholic or not, but please, please help me. And I haven't had a drink since. I just am amazed. I wish all my other character defects would have left that fast. They haven't. But so I got Wilma as my sponsor, and she came and she rode my bus. And when we went around, she said, I want you to say hello to the people. And I said, I don't like these people. She said, she said, that isn't what I asked you. She said, I want you to say hello. Well, there's two requirements for her. One is you need to be honest. And the next thing is that no matter what she asks you to do, as long as it's within the parameters of AA, you just go ahead and do it if she's going to sponsor you. So I did. And I found out one thing, it's my attitude. And she had told me, she said, you have a rotten, no good attitude and you need to change it. And by changing it, I did on that bus, I would smile and I'd say hello. Hello there, how are you? And the whole environment of that bus went from hate to tolerance to love. And I found that it's the attitude, what I bring, what I present. And so I went and thought that was good. Then she said, you want to be a bus driver for the rest of your life? I said, I don't want to be a bus driver in the first place, but I like the money. And so she said, go to college. Well, I did. And I did go to college. I had to learn how to read and I had to learn how to study and do all that stuff. But in 1984, I graduated from the University of Colorado with a degree in business. And that just amazed me. But I had a lot of help and that was good. The next year was the International in Montreal. And see, I'm not drinking, but I'm not the nicest person either. That's what happens when you don't drink and all your character defects, you haven't even named them yet. And so I went to Montreal and met this guy on the airplane. And there's only 6 people and me. And I'm thinking, well, why don't you move back or something? You know, I don't want to sit next to you. Because I said to God, because I don't know whether you had this problem, but every ding-a-ling that come into the clubhouse, I had to have an affair with. And they told me, they said, you don't have to get drunk when it doesn't go right. Well, none of them did go right because they were all based on selfishness and self-seeking motives. So this guy, met him, and we adopted him. We had had a bunch of women from Denver, and we went to the International in Montreal in 1985. And then he said, well, I'll come. We just went to all the meetings with him. And he was an Al-Anon. I didn't know a thing about an Al-Anon because my parents, my adopted parents, they weren't alcoholic and they weren't Al-Anons. And they didn't put up with much from me. But I went ahead and said, well, I'll see you. And he came to Denver. And I didn't know what to do with him. So I had him. I went to football games. We went to the Bronco game, the Falcons game, and CU game. Football. I don't even care for football, but I still wasn't drinking. He said, I'll see you around. Well, to make a long story short, okay, Bob, he had a job that he could travel the country, and we went and had a 1.5 year romance. And then we had a 30-year marriage. And that was the most wonderful thing in the world because when I met him, I wasn't really trying to do anything except trying to be halfway nice. My sponsor helped me grow up in that relationship. And I moved to Kentucky, horse land. I loved horses. And that was just like going into a whole new arena there. Bachelor's degrees don't get you much. At least it didn't. So I went ahead and got my master's, had a lot of help. And then I applied to the doctorate and they let me in. And so I finally did. I got a doctorate in sports psychology and moved to Canada for 3 years and going to AA all the time. I started sponsoring women, number of women, because I find there's different types of alcoholics. In fact, that's one of the things they say in the doctor's opinion. and they talk about the type of alcoholic that's of the hopeless variety. And I'm hopeless. I'm hopeless without this program. I'm hopeless because my thinking gets back in there, and when it gets rolling, if I'm not working a program, it's just going right down back to those old defects of character, selfishness and self-seeking, dishonesty and fear. And there was a lot of things that I had to learn. When you come in at 23 and you don't have the social skills, I didn't go to the proms or whatever, didn't have a clue on a lot of stuff. And I needed to learn a lot of things. And as opposed to an adult that comes in, I sponsored a woman. She was a medical doctor, and the only problem she had was drinking. Well, I had drinking, but I also had this mind that just went over time and nonsense. And I have had to work these steps on a regular basis, have had some wonderful, wonderful sponsors over the years, got into service. I not only became a GSR, I became, started luncheons. It was like an entrepreneur. If there was something that we could create so alcoholics could have fun, I wanted to have fun. I wanted to have a good time. And so we did that. And helping people learn how to be an adult, how to grow up, how to have fun without drinking. And that's one of the things that I see we're missing now, because people are coming in and the only thing they do is just go to the meeting. I couldn't have done it. I needed it all the time. I needed people. I needed the meeting after the meeting. Elizabeth, tell me when I can talk for 2 hours, so don't let me run over, okay?
I just said that. You got about 8 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, one time I spoke for almost 2 hours. The taper could have killed me. But so I had the experience of doing service work. I love service work. In fact, doing service work helped me learn about how to use the traditions. The traditions we learned early on. We learned early on because we don't know how to act and behave with each other. And so we studied that, traditions and relationships. And then the concepts. I love the concepts. When I became, I didn't even like women. I became the chairman for the International Women's Conference. And if I hadn't had the concepts, I probably would have killed those women. Because you get a bunch of older ladies that may or may not work steps. Us old timers, we have an opinion. I just have to keep my mouth shut, which I did today. Because they were talking about they had to set their boundaries and their limits. And I was going to point out that boundaries and limits aren't in the big book, but I didn't say a thing. Because a lot of times, unless somebody invites you into their life to help them, it's a waste of time. All they have is resentment. But I've had a great time. I've gone and lived in many places. I just sold my condo in Maine. And it's a wonderful experience if you haven't had that magic. And there's a magic in this program. I've made amends, the right kind of amends, to many people. And that has helped me, relieves me, shows me that I'm human. And I try not to make them. The biggest one, my sponsor told me, she said, nobody knows that you're dumb. Just keep your mouth shut. Oh, okay. So I've learned how to keep my mouth shut. And but I love sponsoring women. And we had a whole bunch of them in Kentucky. And with me moving around, I moved to Maine, and then I moved here to Alaska to take care of my cousin's estate right during the pandemic. I thought the COVID was going to kill AA. Well, I drove across the country and I stopped and saw a lot of my old sponsees, and AA is doing just fine. But it needs to be focused on the big book to help people find out if they're an alcoholic or they're I call it AA, BB, and fluff and duff. AA is when you are a real alcoholic and you have the mind and the body. Then BB is where you just read the book, you memorize it, you could quote it, but you don't work the steps, you just quote it. And fluff and duffs where people say, well, honey, just go home and take a bubble bath and you'll be okay in the morning. Now, I would have been okay. I would have got 38 and shot him in the morning. But I haven't had to do that. And so I just hope you have the experience of going through the work on a regular basis, because it changes. It just, they said, the big book changes. Well, the words change. They have a deeper meaning because you're on, we have layers when we come in here. Many layers of lies and deceit and selfishness and self-centered things that we do and don't see it. And that's why the fellowship is so good. Get in with a good fellowship. They'll tell you, what's the matter with you today? You're a little off. I miss that. But Homer, it's back to the big book. They always have a topic. And I have to be real gentle when I go and start working with people on service work, because concept traditions, I know them, but you just have to be gentle with people. Going with the attitude, how can I help? What can I do to help you? Is one of the best ways. I love Elizabeth. She's been a real inspiration to me. And so I think that's all. We could go on and on, but I do the steps 1
No, you're
through
good.
12.
I mean, we got
1 through
time if
12.
you want. Hold on.
Oh,
No,
one,
we don't
I'm
really,
not
we don't
doing-
really have time.
No, we don't have to go through all the steps, but I do go through the steps on a regular basis with different people. Because different people have different little approaches. So I learn things. You go to a meeting, I learn things. I learned something today. They said April 20th. And everybody would say, oh, April 20th. And I didn't know what it was about. Well, somehow it's tied to this marijuana that everybody thinks they could smoke and not get tangled up with. I guess that's today, April 20th. Somebody designated marijuana day. Well, I don't have to worry about it because I don't smoke marijuana and I don't drink alcohol. And I'm trying to improve. And my best friend is my puppy right here. Okay. Okay.
Camille,
That's about all. That's all.
thank you so
Thank
much. I'm gonna, hold on, everybody. Come on in. Let's thank Camille.
Thank you, thank you,
Thank you, Camille. Camille, that was
so much.
Thank you, Camille.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Camille.
Lovely.
Thank you,
Thank
Camille.
Yes,
Excellent.
loved it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank
Okay,
you.
okay. I need
Awesome.
everybody to mute themselves. All right, Robert, you got your job. All right, thank you. Oh, shoot, I hope
Okay.
somebody